You can't afford a lawyer, darling. Just sign the papers and walk away with your dignity, if you have any left. My father-in-law smirked, leaning across the mahogany conference table, sliding a stack of divorce papers toward me. He thought he had me completely trapped. He thought because my husband drained our joint savings and hid his assets, I'd be forced to surrender everything. My home, my life savings, and my self-respect. Everyone in that courtroom expected me to break. They thought I was alone, penniless, and helpless. But what my arrogant father-in-law and cheating ex didn't realize was that I wasn't fighting this battle alone. When the courtroom doors swung open and my brother walked in, wearing a sharp suit and holding a leather briefcase that contained every single dirty secret they tried to bury, the smirk on my father-in-law's face vanished instantly. My name is Clara Sterling. I'm 27 years old, and for 4 years, I genuinely believed I was living a fairy tale. I married Julian Vance, a man whose family background couldn't have been more different from mine. I grew up in a quiet, working-class neighborhood with a single mother who worked double shifts, while Julian's family lived in a sprawling estate, built on generational wealth, high society influence, and an overwhelming sense of entitlement. From the very first day Julian brought me home to meet his parents, his father, Richard Vance, made it crystal clear that I was an outsider. Richard was the kind of man who measured a person's worth strictly by the balance in their bank account and the prestige of their last name. To him, my job as a middle school teacher wasn't a respectable career, it was a charity project. He never spoke to me. He spoke down to me, delivering passive-aggressive jabs wrapped in polished elegance. For 4 years, I swallowed my pride, choosing peace over conflict for Julian's sake. But everything shattered the moment I discovered Julian's secret affair. When I confronted him, there was no remorse, no apology, only cold indifference. Within 48 hours, Julian moved out, and his father immediately took total control of the narrative, using his immense wealth to ensure I'd be pushed out of my own life with absolutely nothing. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was a calculated financial execution. A few days after Julian walked out, I tried to pay for groceries, only for my card to be declined. I logged into my online banking app, expecting a simple glitch, but what I saw made my heart drop into my stomach. Our joint checking account, where I had deposited every single paycheck for 4 years, was completely cleared out. The balance read 0. When I checked our savings, the $45,000 we had accumulated together to put toward a future mortgage was gone as well. Julian had quietly transferred every dime into a newly created private trust, an account managed entirely by his father. When I called Julian frantically demanding answers, it wasn't him who picked up the phone. It was Richard. His voice was smooth, dripping with patronizing arrogance, as if he were explaining basic arithmetic to a small child. He informed me that the house we lived in, the car I drove, and even the furniture inside were legally tied to Vance Enterprises shell corporations. I didn't own a single thing. 2 days later, Richard summoned me to his private office. He sat behind a dark mahogany desk, sliding a thin manila envelope across the polished wood. Inside was a draft settlement agreement offering me a miserable $10,000 to pack my bags, sign away all marital claims, and walk away permanently. "Take it, Clara," Richard smirked, leaning back in his leather chair with total satisfaction. "Because if you try to fight this in court, my legal team will drag this out until you're completely bankrupt. Top-tier trial lawyers charge $600 an hour. A 27-year-old schoolteacher can't afford a lawyer to fight my son. So don't make this harder than it needs to be." Richard expected me to burst into tears, scream, or sign the paper out of sheer desperation. But as I looked at his triumphant smile, a quiet calmness washed over me. I pushed the envelope back across his desk, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I'll see you in court." His laugh echoed down the hallway as I walked out. He truly believed he had won, assuming I was heading home to pack my bags. But Richard didn't know everything about my family. That night, sitting on the floor of my apartment surrounded by 3 years of carefully saved bank statements, utility bills, and tax returns I had quietly duplicated over the years, I made a call to my older brother, Leo. Leo hadn't been back to our hometown in almost 3 years. His work kept him traveling constantly, operating in high-stakes corporate circles that our family rarely talked about. When he answered, hearing his steady, familiar voice made the tension in my shoulders drop. "Clara," he said gently. "What's wrong?" I laid out every detail: Julian's affair, the emptied bank accounts, the shell companies, and Richard's arrogant warning that I couldn't afford a lawyer. There was a long silence on the line. Then, Leo's voice shifted, turning razor-sharp. "Email me every document you have right now, Clara. Tell Richard and his lawyers you're representing yourself. Let them think you're completely defenseless. I'm catching the next flight home." The morning of the final hearing arrived, heavy with gray clouds and a chill that seemed to seep into the very walls of the county courthouse. I walked into the hallway alone, wearing a modest dark suit, carrying only a single notepad. Standing near the courtroom doors were Richard, Julian, and a team of 3 attorneys dressed in tailored designer suits. They were laughing comfortably, chatting with the relaxed ease of men who knew the outcome was already decided. Julian wouldn't even look me in the eye, hiding behind his father like he had done his entire life. But Richard looked straight at me, his mouth twisting into that familiar, condescending smirk. "Last chance, Clara," Richard whispered as I passed them to enter the courtroom. "Sign the agreement now, or my lawyers will make sure you leave this room owing us money." I ignored him, walking straight to the petitioner's table and sitting down quietly. A few minutes later, the judge entered and took her seat on the bench. She shuffled through the heavy case file, her eyebrows furrowing as she looked down at me. "Mrs. Vance, I see here that you do not have legal representation present today. Are you intending to represent yourself in a complex asset division matter?" Before I could answer, Richard's lead attorney stood up, adjusting his cuffs with an arrogant smile. "Your Honor, the respondent moves for an immediate summary judgment. The petitioner clearly lacks the legal counsel or resources to contest the valid premarital and corporate agreements established by the Vance estate." The judge frowned, turning back to me. "Mrs. Vance." I took a deep breath, looked back at the double oak doors at the rear of the courtroom, and said, "My counsel has just arrived, Your Honor." Right on cue, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resounding thud that echoed off the high marble ceiling. Every head turned in unison. Walking down the center aisle was my older brother, Leo. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, carried a leather briefcase, and radiated an undeniable air of absolute authority. He didn't look like a nervous family member coming to offer emotional support. He looked like a storm rolling in. My father-in-law, Richard, scoffed quietly under his breath, muttering to Julian, "Is this her little brother? What is he going to do?" Leo walked straight past their table, without bestowing a single glance on either of them. He approached the podium, set his heavy briefcase down with a deliberate click, and stood before the bench. "May it please the court," Leo said, his voice deep, calm, and commanding. Leo Sterling, senior partner at Sterling & Sterling LLP, appearing pro bono on behalf of the petitioner, Clara Sterling. At the sound of that law firm's name, Richard's lead attorney froze. The smug smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief. Sterling & Sterling was one of the most feared corporate forensic and appellate firms in the country, the kind of firm that multi-billion-dollar conglomerates hired when they were under federal investigation. Richard's attorney frantically leaned over, whispering frantically in Richard's ear, his composure completely shattered. I watched as the color visibly drained from my father-in-law's face, his arrogance evaporating in a single, terrifying second as he realized who had just entered the arena. Leo didn't waste a single second. He unsnapped his briefcase, removed 3 thick, leather-bound folders, and handed 2 copies directly to the bailiff to present to the judge and opposing counsel. "Your Honor," Leo began, his voice echoing with effortless precision, "the defense has claimed my client lacks the resources to contest these corporate agreements. However, my firm has conducted a comprehensive forensic audit of Vance Enterprises over the last 72 hours. Richard's lead attorney leapt to his feet. "Objection. This evidence was not submitted during discovery." "It wasn't submitted during discovery because your clients deliberately concealed these accounts from the court," Leo countered smoothly, not even turning around. He looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, these records prove that 36 hours after my sister was served with divorce papers, Mr. Julian Vance and Mr. Richard Vance illegally transferred $45,000 of marital funds into an offshore shell company registered in Nevada. Furthermore, our audit revealed systematic tax fraud, forged signatures on property titles, and deliberate perjury regarding marital assets. The judge's eyes narrowed as she flipped through the financial statements Leo provided. She slammed her pen onto the bench, the sharp noise striking the courtroom like a gavel. Mr. Vance, the judge said, her voice dropping into a dangerously cold tone as she glared down at Richard and Julian. Is this true? Did you attempt to hide assets and submit falsified financial disclosures to this court? Julian sat paralyzed, staring at his lap, completely incapable of speaking. Richard tried to stammer out an explanation, but his voice cracked, all his previous composure completely ruined. I am halting these proceedings immediately, the judge declared sternly. I am freezing all accounts associated with Vance Enterprises pending a full court-ordered audit. And if these forensic documents hold up, I will be referring this matter directly to the district attorney's office for criminal fraud charges. The smirk on Richard's face didn't just vanish. His entire world collapsed right before his eyes. 2 weeks after that explosive court hearing, the nightmare officially ended. Face to face with overwhelming forensic evidence and the very real threat of criminal prosecution, Richard and Julian's legal team threw in the towel. They agreed to every single one of our terms, without contesting a thing. I received full ownership of our home, complete reimbursement for every dollar drained from our joint accounts, and a substantial lump sum settlement. As for Richard and Julian, their troubles were only just beginning. The court-ordered audit triggered a formal investigation into Vance Enterprises, leaving their high society reputation in complete ruins and facing massive federal fines. Walking out of the courthouse for the final time, the crisp afternoon air felt lighter than it ever had before. I turned to Leo, giving him a tight hug that said everything words couldn't. I told you. Leo smiled softly, patting my shoulder. Nobody mess with my sister. For 4 years, I let a wealthy, arrogant family make me feel small, weak, and powerless. But standing on those stone steps, I realized that true strength isn't about how much money you have in your bank account. It's about knowing your worth, holding your ground, and having the right people standing in your corner when the storm hits. If you were in my place, would you have given them a second chance? Or would you have let the law take its full course? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. I read every single one.